started. Recording has started. Welcome everyone. PowerShell Core Community Call, November 16th, 2017. Should probably say that every time.
Yeah.
Okay. Everybody see my screen okay?
Not seeing anything yet. There we go. I see it.
Cool.
You're not using the wide view.
The wide view?
Yeah. This is. Oh, you're an Edge. Never mind. There's a plugin for Chrome to get the GitHub wide view.
I've switched to Firefox Quantum.
I tried that for a bit, but I need all my plugins. Anyways.
All right. So we got RFC GA tentative dates, buckets of investment for the 6/1 timeframe. Sort of what we're. So let me back up. Sorry. We want to talk about when we think RC. Why did I say RFC? RC and GA of PowerShell 6.0 will come out. So we have some pretty firm dates there, we think. We want to talk about the stuff that we're going to be investing into PowerShell in the 6.1 timeframe. This is, as we've said, the sort of 6 months following PowerShell 6.0's release. And then we've got, I think I may have talked about this last time, but I have a little bit more info on the support lifecycle that we'll be supporting with PowerShell 6.0 on day one. And then pretty much whatever else you guys want to talk about, and something that I'm definitely forgetting that I will remember as we get through it. So,
Well, let's talk about the RC first, because that's coming up.
Yes.
So my team has already branched off to start the RC release. We started doing all the builds. I'm not sure if everyone realizes there's actually a ton of work that is involved in actually putting out the RC. Like Joey's brought up like a checklist of items. So that checklist is going to be worked through. Now, I'll just put this out there right now. Like, I don't know whether or not, as of right now, we're going to hit tomorrow's date. So this is going to be like in real time here, where we may end up slipping a day. Me as a manager prefer not to have my team work on the weekend or late at night. So we'll see how that goes. And because we're still like pre-support, then I'm more comfortable slipping a day if we need to. So just be aware of that. I'm still trying to be hopeful that we'll hit tomorrow, but don't be surprised if it moves up to like Monday. Other than that, so the other key thing to understand is that now that we branched off for the RC, that means that master at this point is effectively 6.1. So the community should continue to party on master. Just be aware that if it's not something that is pre-approved for the release candidate for 6.0, then it's not part of 6.0, but don't worry. It'll be part of a future 6.1 release. And I think the current thinking that we have is that we will probably not spend time putting out a 6.1 beta until after GA of 6.0. And I think, Joey, we are prepared to have a specific date that we are landing on for GA.
I'm using the wrong mute system. Yes, we are roughly targeting January 10th as the release date. So 6.0 GA, these things do slip. These things happen, but we're trying to be as transparent as possible and say Jan 10th is the one we've put on the calendar, and expect blogs and announcements and tweets and fanfare. But yeah, I mean, those of you that have been with us on this train and the journey and everything know that this is it's almost more of a formality than anything, right? Like you switch the thing over and we're supporting it in production and that sort of thing. So yeah, no, I think we're in a pretty good place.
Yeah. One other thing people should understand is, like, as we get the release candidate out, we only really have like a handful of code bugs or product bugs that we're taking for the GA release. So ideally, barring any blocking issues. So if you guys, I encourage everyone to, I tweeted out like a script that we use to install daily builds. Once we start getting the RC out, and actually that script probably needs to be updated because it's looking off of master versus the RC branch. But anyways, do self-host the RC. And if you find any major issues that would block you from deploying it into production, raise those up as soon as you can. CC Joy and I so it gets attention. And we'll make a call whether or not it's something we want to spin up and potentially, if we have to incur the cost of having an RC2, and that's the right thing to do, then we'll do that, right? Otherwise, we're going to continue moving down the path to get to GA so that we can move towards 6.1 and more future releases after that. So hopefully all that makes sense. Let's see. Yeah. So let me ask if there's any questions about the release candidate or GA, which is the new term for RTM, since there's no manufacturing anymore. For 6.0, we can move on to talking about what 6.1 means. PS Gradle. I don't know.
Yeah, so no. So Gradle's a build automation thing, but these guys are just joking about the automation of these release activities. So do you want to just talk very briefly about? We're going to talk about what 6.1 will look like from a feature investment, but what else we're doing in the 6.1 timeframe?
So part of 6.1 is improving our engineering system, where we are going to automate as much as we can a lot of stuff that we do manually. And so like some of the big buckets of the automation is right now signing, because we have to sign everything that we for official releases so that people know that this is coming from Microsoft and not being built and coming from somewhere else with some other stuff in it. A lot of that's manual, and that's just manual not because of us, but because of the way it works at Microsoft. And we're working with those teams to see how much we can automate. But there's some other stuff that we need to automate on our side. Like, for example, when we do a test pass today, we are still manually logging into VMs and running our tests. And there's different reasons for that. Part of it is a lot of our tests were designed so that you have the repo, you're building from the repo, and you're running from the repo. So we're going to do we'll be spending probably at least 2 months in the new calendar year just on engineering efficiency type of work. We'll still be fixing, or at least reviewing any changes coming from the community in terms of pull requests and issues, but you probably won't see a ton of code changes coming from us during that time if it's not related to infrastructure type of work that would show up in the repo. There's some stuff that we're doing in the infrastructure side that doesn't show up on the GitHub repo. It's all internal using Azure and stuff like that. So just be aware that's kind of like a lot of the focus for at least the first 4 months of the new calendar year. And then after that, we'll transition to doing some planned feature work that we have for 6.1. In addition to doing our regular maintenance maintainer type of work for any contributions we get to the community. So if we want to maybe transition into some of the big buckets, and again, anything that we have quote unquote planned for 6.1 is subject to change. This is just what we are investigating right now. Let's see. Actually, before I get into that, one other thing I'll just mention, and this is more like a FYI. So we had some small reorgs shuffle within our broader team. So I was not previously the engineering manager for some of the other repos that we own, but now I am. So for example, editor services is now under me, the VS Code integration, script analyzer, Plaster, Phosphor, I guess technically Polaris now, and trying to think what else. A lot of the PowerShell tooling is now under me. So the only other thing that I'll be doing and I didn't get like a ton of resources along with that. So I'm gonna also work within my team to kind of have some consistency across all those repos, so that they're all following similar processes, have similar tool chains. So at least the experience across all the repos I own should have the right level of attention from the team, and also make it easier for the community to contribute. Whether they're if they're moving across different repos, should at least be very similar, unlike what it is today. All right, so going to 6.1 then, let me see, I'm bringing up my internal spreadsheet here. There we are. All right. Hold on, somebody sorted this. Okay. All right. There are still some gaps between Windows PowerShell 5.1 and PowerShell 6 that we need to resolve. So for example, right now in PowerShell Core 6, we actually don't have integration with Device Guard and App Locker because those were stubbed out when it was ported to Nano Server. So we need to just kind of get the old code back. Let me see what else. There's some additional work that we want to do for SSH remoting. So that's kind of like a V1 or V0.9 that we had and that we're going to ship with on PowerShell Core 6, partly because OpenSSH on Windows itself is not complete. That I'm hoping will be sometime next half of next year. But there's some other work that we need to do in terms of performance improvement and also making it easier. So having like maybe working with the enable PS remoting commandlet to make it easy to set up SSH remoting for novice users. Concurrency is something that we've talked about. We have an RFC published by Bruce. We're going to revisit that one. That's something I definitely want to get in, of having at least a consistent way. And right now we have not settled on whether we are actually going to implement something new or whether we just want to review what the community has already done and decide that, similar to what we did with Pester, and say, hey, this is what the PowerShell team endorses and we're going to use that. So that might end up being a possibility. There's already some work started to kind of move the help system out from the core engine. And there's some additional work I want to do there to get away from MAML all up and move to just supporting Markdown natively in the help system. I think that will make things a lot easier for us and also for doc writers because we have this whole platypus system now that does the conversion. But in addition to that, having better rendering of the help. So Jim Truer on my team has been doing some experiments with curses-like libraries, but not specifically curses. And so, we're investigating having that made available. So in the future, but probably not in the 6.1 timeframe unless the community contributes it, having like an outgrid view that I've kind of talked about in the past in the console. I think that'd be a great demo for new users to an object-oriented shell. Let's see what else. We want to have an ability as we move forward with doing future work of allowing the user to turn on and off experimental features. So there'll be some stuff that will start in 6.1 but may not be complete. We just kind of want to get some feedback. So we want to have an ability to say, hey, this one is experimental means not low in quality in terms of bugs, but just the design might change. So, it's not, if until it's fully baked, you might have quote unquote breaking changes by design. But we need some feature flags to enable that and also allow module authors to participate in that as well. Let's see what else. We want to investigate having the automatic parameter for invoke command and or not invoke command, but basically any commandlet so you can target a remote machine, whether that's an on-prem machine or something that's in Azure. We want to get back an implementation of sudo on non-Windows against a commandlet. So sudo does work against PowerShell itself, but if you're in PowerShell and you just want to sudo a specific commandlet, then today you would have to sudo another instance of PowerShell calling that commandlet. So we want to kind of fix that experience. And then it'd be nice to have a similar thing on Windows, but that's a little bit more complicated. Now that we have, we will have an official Raspberry Pi build for the release candidate, although I believe people should still view it as a beta because .NET Core itself is not fully supporting ARM32 yet. But we want to bootstrap the community and start building out maybe some commandlet support to actually manage sensors. So I have a couple of engineers that are excited about that. And I think that's probably some of the major areas.
Yeah, so I just wanted to, I wasn't sure if that totally landed the computer name one. So this would basically, we haven't really landed on a real design here yet, but this is one that would essentially wrap invoke command to give you dash computer name like functionality generically on any commandlets you want. I'm not sure that it would be a common parameter necessarily, but it might be something like should process where you just add an attribute and you get this thing. I know I actually had a conversation, Steve, with Jeffrey yesterday about how this might be more useful from like a pipeline perspective. This was actually when he was talking about the caret symbol, and like that you
Yeah.
might want to like actually, similar to like backgrounding a pipeline by throwing an ampersand on the end, you might want to like remote a pipeline by throwing a caret or some character on the end. So I think we should be very experimental and playful in that design. But
I think for all of the stuff I kind of talked about, we'll definitely go through the RFC process. So we'll go back to that, and we'll again go through that exercise. We'll figure out how to make that whole process more streamlined as well. And you'll definitely see us pay more attention to that, the PowerShell RFC repo, in addition to the community submitted RFCs.
So I have a bunch of questions here from the community. One from Trevor on polish of VS Code, Joel on PowerShell Standard 5.1, plus one for Joel, and then David moving on with Tyler potentially pushing out a patch release. I'm going to add this one too, Keith, the enhanced module manifest support for cross-platform. How to declare a command is exported only on Windows or a module is required only on Windows, etc. Yes, that would definitely be something we should talk about here. Let's see, module manifest improvements for cross-plat. Cool. So you wanted to start at the top here, Steve? I think these two are probably. Whoop, I didn't mean to do that.
Yes.
These two are probably pretty close.
Yeah. So unfortunately, David Wilson decided to move on. He's still in good terms, so he's still contributing where he can. But yeah, so Tyler, who's most famous for Polaris, is currently the engineer that's owning both editor services and the VS Code integration. And I'm having another senior engineer who's new to that space, or at least new to that code base, to be ramped up probably after we get the RC out. So definitely putting more resources towards both the VS Code integration as well as editor services itself. I just want to make a call out that I think Keith Hill's been doing an awesome job there. So keep that up. And so definitely, I don't have any specific plans. This is an area that I recently took over, so I need to kind of review what is happening there and figure out what are the big things that we want to do for during the next 6 months in that space. So I don't have as much concrete stuff I can say about that right now. Let's see. Yes, and yes, Keith, Tyler is one of the priorities he has is to push out a patch release. He recently got approval to get things signed, so that hopefully will be happening this week, maybe. Keep in mind that Tyler is also new to that code base, so give him a little bit of slack. He's doing his best. Let me see. Yes, PowerShell standard library. Let's talk about that. So Jim Truer is working on producing a PowerShell standard 5.1 is probably what we'll call it library, and also hopefully in the near future a PowerShell standard 6 library. I don't have an ETA right now. When we did the PowerShell standard 3 library, that was a huge manual effort that involved a bunch of committee members and also Jason at the time. So what Jim is doing right now, he's trying to build some tooling to generate some of the automation for that to understand the diffs. And again, one of the complications is that we want to make sure that any PowerShell standard library is always forward compatible. And because of the difference between PowerShell Core 6 and Windows PowerShell 5.1, we can't just generate, here's all the new public APIs since PowerShell v3 and stick that in. We actually have to kind of review it and make sure that it's not stuff that we've explicitly by design removed from PowerShell Core 6. So I think from a time frame, the target I have is sometime between the RC and GA. I don't have anything more specific right now because as we start entering December, people's availability will get less. But definitely we will have something at least for 5.1 and before GA timeframe, so that we can actually start validating some of the promises we made in terms of having like portable modules and having a good developer experience. Let's see what else. We get enhanced module manifest support for cross-platform add 6.1. Oh, yeah. So I think that there is limited support for some of that already. I think if Keith, if you have some kind of proposal go ahead and maybe just start with an issue. I think there was an issue already on the PowerShell Core 6 repo, but we can certainly discuss, what's the best way to tackle that. One of the challenges doing any changes to the module manifest is down level. So it has to be some way that doesn't mess up Windows PowerShell 5.1 client trying to use that same module. And in some cases, I'm fine taking changes down to Windows PowerShell 5.1 to support that. Just keep in mind that at this point, any changes we make to Windows PowerShell 5.1 will only show up in new versions of Windows 10 and new versions of Windows Server, whatever year they call the next one. I'll just call it 2016. Let me see.
I think they're on that continuous train now. They just put out the 1709, so they're like,
okay.
They'll probably have an 18 something or other. I don't know.
Yeah, but I think the main point is that there is no plans for new Windows Management Framework packages for down level. So 1718 Server 2008 R2 2008 or no 2012 R2 2012 or 2008 even. So Trevor, if there's any specific reliability issues on VS Code that is not already open or is open and needs more attention because it's impacting you, let me know. Just CC me on those so I can take a look. Otherwise, you should assume that I am not as aware of the issues on either the VS Code integration or the other services at this point in time. My focus right now is on the PowerShell Core 6 RC. But once that's out, I want to spend more time on the other repos, making sure I understand the top priorities in those. Let's see. Okay. I think I got through at least all the questions I see on the chat window.
Yeah, that's really the problem with it, Trevor. And I was going to say, like, general reliability, I think it's just, it's like, yeah, it hangs sometimes. And I've hit some of those too. But, yeah, just log as much as you can. And I think, fresh eyes in the code base will certainly, we'll start to maybe see some places for improvement there.
Regarding document, you want to talk about documentation?
Yeah, I can talk about documentation. Okay. So documentation refresh for 6.0 GA. So I don't know how many of you hang out in the PowerShell docs repo, but you may have noticed a shift in some of the maintainers happening there as well. Juan Pablo Joffre, who was doing most of the work there, has moved on from Microsoft. And then Sean Wheeler, who's been doing a lot of the DSC work already, and some of the some Azure PowerShell stuff, I believe, is going to be stepping in to work more on PowerShell itself. So we want to get a ton of, we still have these labels for documentation needed. I like huge props to Mark on, and this is actually should be PRs and issues. You'll see we've got a lot of these. Huge prop to Mark for just totally, basically giving us all the documentation that we need to go add to the docs repo from within most of his pull requests or issues here. So yeah, basically for all these, we got to go back and do the work. Anyone that's willing to help out with this, we'd love the help. A lot of this is going to be me. A lot of this is going to be Sean. I think engineers will slowly start to do more of this going forward, or it'll happen more sort of synchronously with the actual work going in. We've also got some stuff happening behind the scenes with the pipeline for building out PowerShell docs and making sure that the cabs and all the MAML make its way to updatable help. Because today, while we do publish the cabs as part of a continuous deployment pipeline to Azure, none of the updatable help systems actually point to that Azure Blob location. That may be changing any day now with 6.0. We wanted to make sure 6.0 worked, and then we can switch out forward links for 3, 4, and 5 so that actually happens down level without any sort of QFEs or patching. So yeah, we're trying to improve the documentation. Hopefully you guys have seen docs.microsoft.com's been getting better. There's been a lot of investment from Microsoft on documentation. We take it a lot more seriously than we may have in the past, and just expect, improved docs for 6.0, release notes with all the major features, sort of summary of change logs at a higher level, breaking changes guide we want to put out, which is basically we've also been logging, as you see, many of these are breaking changes, all the breaking changes that we've been making. Many of these are very, very minor, but in any case, I know in the past we've made some of these in other versions of PowerShell where we've regressed behavior, and we haven't documented them, and it's been very difficult for people to understand, where they might need to mitigate differences between versions. So, we want to fix that and get all this out, but just bear with us. It's we have a significant backlog there, and we're just chewing our way through it. Sorry, Sean did not work on DSC stuff, just Azure PowerShell. I felt like maybe you at one point did like Azure Automation stuff though, Sean?
No, that was all Eric, was Azure
it.
Automation and DSC.
Got it. Sorry about that.
No worries. There's been a lot of turnover and flux on things that people have been working on, and now I'm focused on core PowerShell and Azure PowerShell, and we're looking to move DSC and automation into the Azure Docs team more.
Awesome. Yeah, and thank you, Sean. It's his formal introduction, I guess. He's been joining these community calls for a few months here, but this is Sean, everyone. We're glad to have you.
Howdy.
So there was also, that's actually a really good suggestion, Trevor. Maybe some telemetry to help gather data. I don't know that we have any telemetry in VS Code at all today. I'm actually not sure.
I don't think we do.
But I certainly, wouldn't be opposed to some minor stuff there. I think, Steve, we're looking at 10 o'clock here. Do you want to talk about this guy right here?
Guy.
Our new committee members.
Yeah. I tweeted about it. So there's been some small changes to the committee. Well, I'll just say that. So we added Dombo and Jim Truer, who are two of my engineers. Those of you who've been on PowerShell for a while know Jim was one of the original PMs on PowerShell from inception, I believe. So he has a lot of historical context. Dombo has been doing some awesome work on the repo. He's got a lot of depth and knowledge on the technical side. So I think having both of them participate in the committee will help us go through our backlog of committee review issues and PRs, hopefully much quicker than we have before. I should also, I guess, mention, although we don't, is so Jason Shirk, who's been doing a ton of stuff on PowerShell, is busy with his new position. He's not on the PowerShell core team anymore. So he's also not on the committee, simply because he doesn't have the time to dedicate to it, but he still participates on the repo where he can. So he's definitely still part of the PowerShell community.
I have a quick question, if I may.
Sure.
And apologies in front if this has been asked before. This is only my second time joining these calls. I find them very useful, though. So I struggle to find official information on PowerShell 6 and in regards to things like release cadence moving forward. Now that WMF version is being replaced with Core moving forward. What is there a defined release cadence, and also what about the support lifecycle of the product, the versions of the products? Will they continue to be supported? Will they, not be supported after a certain amount of time? N-1 type of thing. Do you guys have any information around that's firmed up at this point, or is it still sort of being fleshed out?
So I'll let Joey hold on. So I'll let Joey talk about the support lifecycle. Let me just cover the release cadence. So I don't think at this time we may not have anything formally documented other than what we've talked about on the committee meetings and maybe what stuff I tweeted. And some of this we're still trying to figure out because open source is relatively new, although we've been doing this for over a year now. But my plan is that after we get GA out around January 10th timeframe, if we can hit that date, then going forward, every 6 months, we would have a major release. So it'd be 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, 6.4. And then we'll still try to keep to have a 3-week release cadence for the beta interim builds. But again, you can always just install the nightly builds. The nightly builds do pass our all of the existing automated tests. It just means that as of right now, it doesn't pass all of the tests run on all the platforms we support, which is what we manually have to exercise when we do a major release. But that's kind of like the cadence for that. So then I'll let Joey talk about support.
Yeah, this is perfect because I think I didn't maybe didn't talk about this last time. So we definitely plan on having that documentation available the day we GA. So there will be an official page on docs.microsoft.com that's got the Visio graph of what we expect, the long-term support kind of thing to look like. Today, we are adopting what Microsoft is calling the modern lifecycle, or I think it's the modern lifecycle approach. As Keith sort of alluded to here, this is the fix forward plan essentially. So this means that when 6.0 comes out, it will be officially supported by Microsoft for anybody that's got N kinds of support from Microsoft. I think they're too copious to get into right now, but you're going to be supported in most cases if you have support from Microsoft. That will have a guarantee of some number of months of support, likely somewhere in the range of 6 to 12 months. We haven't closed yet, and then when 6.1 comes out, you'll essentially have 6 to 12 months from that date to move to 6.1. Again, the time hasn't been closed, and it's not something that we want to adopt as a matter of course. I want to be super clear. This is what we're doing today to sort of stick our toes in and make sure that we know how to support and service this thing, and that we haven't done anything egregious. We've been going on these steps from alpha to beta to RC to GA, and we've got a way more test coverage than we had in the past. But we still want to make sure, if something big has to change between 6.0 and 6.1, we're definitely limiting ourselves and raising the bar on breaking changes and that sort of thing. But if we really screwed up somewhere, we want to make sure we can move everybody forward to 6.1. So you may very well see 6.1 or 6.2 at some point in the future becoming a long-term servicing branch, and us saying, hey, this is the one we're going to support for 5+5 or whatever the typical fixed life cycle is. And at that point, that support page with all that stuff will be officially documented and that sort of thing. But today we're sort of saying, if you're not comfortable with modern lifecycle, you might want to sit out 6.1 possibly, or sit out 6.0, possibly 6.1, and just sort of wait for us to have that more stable cadence. But we will, at some point have that. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, it definitely helps. So from what I'm hearing, it sounds like there's a strong idea of how this will work, but it needs to still be fleshed out, and it hasn't been formalized yet, and will be, once the product is GA, there will be some artifacts behind it with some support statements, and as you guys progress through the first couple of releases, you'll have a more firm idea of how this will work moving forward. Did I sum it up correctly?
Yeah. That's perfect. And really, we want feedback in this space too. Like if and you can provide that here. You can provide that as part of a GitHub issue. That's we can label those discussion. We can talk about those sorts of things there. But really, we want to know when and why a support lifecycle that we've adopted is a problem for you. If you guys are like, hey, we're ready to adopt this thing in production on 10,000 seats or whatever, and I like all I need is 5+5, then we can have that conversation. So we're always open to improving these things.
Okay, and just one last question around the notes you guys are taking. Do you guys provide those at the end of these calls?
Yeah, I've been really bad about taking notes, and am trying to do a much better job. If you go to our PowerShell RFC repo, we do have a community call folder that I put whatever I did manage to bring out of the last meetings. So some of these notes are here. It looks like my pull request for the last one never got merged.
All right.
Oh, I was supposed to a single
yeah.
form of. Oh man.
Yeah,
He
you should
doesn't
look
like
at the
my.
feedback. trying to put it on me.
That's pretty weak. So anyway, yeah, we published that here, but I'm like, as you can see, this is a lot more copious than like the kind of weak notes I took in the past. So I'm trying to do a better job here. And unfortunately, the last recording, one of them got like really garbled too. Like we should be probably double recording these. So our apologies, but yeah, definitely keep your eyes peeled on this folder here on the PowerShell RFC repo.
Oh, this is great. Thanks.
No worries. Thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I didn't see that. That's Ilya. He's always just 10 hours ahead of us. It's oh man.
So Keith, thanks for that. However, the main challenge for us isn't the tooling assignments. It is being able to use the official Microsoft cert, which is heavily guarded.
Yeah,
So it's more of
basically
a
we have
process.
air-gapped, like super air-gapped, like Microsoft-owned servers with, probably armed guards sitting outside them or whatever, where we have to compile our code, because if we don't, then, the compiler could be compromised, or
It's a
the...
bunch of compliance stuff. It's not a lack of tools. It is a heavy process to get stuff signed.
Yes, by design. Unfortunately, these slow, arduous, trust verifying processes turn out to not typically be very automatable.
You have to have like two keys turned at the same time, kind of thing.
Yes, that is, I think, not actually hyperbole. Like, these smart cards, like, all going in together and by our powers united or something. Yeah, no, it is a good thing. Blockchain for everything, totally, Trevor. Yeah,
that actually would be kind of interesting.
Ethereum smart contract for you guys can share the work for compiling our stuff.
All right. Are there any other DSC core? No news on DSC core.
No news on DSC core. I talked to Michael Green about it a bunch last night. He was in town. And I think progress is getting made there. They definitely want to provide an update sooner rather than later. So, but conversations are heavily in flux. So they're working out a bunch of the architectural stuff, and I think you should hear from them. I'm not sure before the holidays, but hopefully shortly after. But unfortunately, I don't have anything to share there. Sorry, Ben. No, go ahead.
For my edification, is DSC Core supposed to be like a core set of resources that's cross-platform? Is that what I'm assuming?
DSC Core, so there was a roadmap blog that got published on the PowerShell blog that I'll link to in the notes afterwards. But I think the way they're thinking about it right now is to not for it to necessarily be as tightly coupled to PowerShell, and I could be misspeaking here. I don't want to like put my foot in my mouth and get everybody excited about one thing or another thing. But yeah, I think the goal is not to necessarily go like full core CLR only, but to make something that's a little more modular and a little more agnostic to different types of PowerShells or different types of execution engines. But I'm not necessarily sure there.
Yeah, I think the short version, it is a completely new LCM. And I believe they are looking at writing the engine. So despite the name Core, it's not related to PowerShell Core in the sense that it's dependent on .NET Core. As Joel Bennett mentioned, I think they're looking at doing it all native code, making it portable across different, Linux, Mac, and Windows, but primarily Linux and Windows, and being able to support resources written in different languages like Python, as an example, in addition to PowerShell.
But again, I think that all of that is being discussed and is on the table, and so it's like there's a zero commit from our statements. But I will, like I said, link to that blog that I think covers most of it, and then or at least at a very high level, and then I think I expect something from Michael in the next couple months. But I will take that feedback down as well, Trevor. I think I think that that's along the lines of where they're going. I would like us to be independently successful and independently useful. Sorry, somebody was there hopping on the call. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just curious. Is this coming out of a customer ask, or is this something that Microsoft is trying to steer themselves as far as?
I think there's a combination there. I know that we've done a great deal of work on the LCM for Azure internally. I'm not necessarily sure that stuff is the best for customers, or what of that will be shared with customers, or what. But I think that there's a combination of things, and I think that some of what we've heard from customers simply around resource coverage is driving some of the architectural decisions. I think, which is that I have a lot of automation in a lot of languages and a lot of different operating systems and config management systems and that thing. And so I think building something that sort of understands that reality and doesn't shoehorn a single type of thinking or of language into the customer's config management pipeline is probably a good thing for customers.
Interesting. What's the best way to get plugged into DSC Core as far as updates? And is it this call? Is the best way?
No, yeah. Again, I'm probably putting more foot in mouth than I should here. The best way today is to make sure to read our blog. And again, I'm gonna link to this guy, DSC Future Direction Update. So DSC Core. Let's put this in here. Definitely keeping your eyes peeled here. I think that there's a DSC resource kit. Are they still doing a community call? Yeah, so they still have a community call, and they're going to be a lot more plugged into what's happening in DSC. Although the resource kit is still a distinct initiative from DSC Core, but I think you're probably going to see a ramp up of engagement after they've sort of worked out the initial architectural thinkings, but I know that they want to drive the development of whatever gets put out as DSC Core in an open and transparent way. I don't want to commit to where the source would live or where the issues would live or any of that sort of thing, but I know that they want to do things very similar to how we've done them in PowerShell, and I'm having very active discussions to sort of help them understand how we got to where we are today with PowerShell. So we're working in that direction for sure.
And let me just add one thing that maybe isn't 100% clear to the community, which is the DC team is a peer team to my team, and we have distinct engineers on those two different projects. So I think that we have we're kind of aware of some of the stuff they're doing, but definitely I think for the specific questions, going to their community call would be better. Let's see. I think I've seen probably new features that are not fully cross-platform compatible.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Mark. You've been working a lot in the web commandlet space. I'd expect that this is primarily around certificate and SSL related stuff. That's where you've been running into it today.
Yep, that's primarily where it's just that there's certain things that work either not at all or partially in Mac OS and sometimes on Linux too. So just wanting some guidance on what I need to make sure I'm doing before I put in a pull request for it.
Yeah, totally. I think as a general principle, what we've tried to sort of manage between two goalposts internally is, we've got a set of functionality that works on Windows PowerShell 5.1, and we know that a ton of that functionality cannot and will never work on non-Windows platforms. But to the greatest extent we can, we're trying to implement all of that functionality at least on PowerShell Core for Windows. So, we want GA to continue working. We're going to go some of what the security stuff that Steve mentioned before. We want to go make sure that all the device guard and app locker and UMSI or AMSI stuff continues to work. And all those sorts of things that we know probably won't work on Linux. So there we've got a divergence in behavior basically between the Windows and the non-Windows PowerShell cores. From the Linux and Mac standpoint, I'll leave Mac aside for just a second, but I think for between the Linux distros, we've tried to say anything we do on one Linux distro should work on all of them. Like we support like 7 or 8 now. I don't think that they have enough differences for us to justify putting anything in there that's, busted just on CentOS or whatever. And I think it's probably pretty unlikely. We've also tried to limit that on Mac, but I think that there's been some places where on Mac, specifically around the crypto, there are just some really difficult limitations in the operating system layer that are bad enough that I don't think that we can justify sort of limiting what we're doing on Linux. So I'd say, there's sort of a gut check in there at some point, and Steve, you're welcome to pile on after I finish here, but I think, at some point you go, okay, how useful is the feature? How egregious has Apple sort of reduced the functionality here on OS X or Mac OS, excuse me, and then, do we think that it's worth diverging from Mac OS to support that feature on Linux distros? And I think so far we've sort of avoided this problem by just saying, hey, you should install PowerShell with Homebrew and you get the OpenSSL build and like all this stuff's going to work again. But I think that this is probably actually more of a .NET Core issue. I think going forward, they're trying to work this out with Apple as well. But I don't know. Do you have any thoughts there, Steve? I think that's kind of how we've been thinking about it. But I think we're
on the same page here for the most part. I think that Mark, if you have some awesome feature you want to add to web commands and it's limited or doesn't work at all, like let's say hypothetically on Mac, I would say let's take it case by case. And in general, I agree with Joe. Like we want to kind of be that abstraction layer for DevOps. So that you can kind of rely on it, but we already know that we have some things that do work on Windows that may never work on Linux and Mac because the OS itself doesn't support it, and we're not going to port that code from Windows to non-Windows. But if it's a case where it's a limitation in core effects, we should definitely start opening up those issues and let them know that their implementation over the OS is not sufficient because they may not know it, especially in regards to some of the web stuff that you're doing. And if it's something that's from their point of view by design, then we can make a call on our side and say, hey, maybe it's a documentation thing, or maybe we explicitly in exceptional cases say, hey, this is just not supported on Mac, and maybe we don't show that parameter, or maybe we provide it not supported. But to kind of think through what that experience will look like. But I think it's unfortunately, unless it's very black and white, it's going to be very case by case to decide what the right thing to do is there. But I would say don't by default limit what you want to do because that there's some issues on a different platform.
Thanks.
For those of you that don't know Mark, he's been just crushing it on the web commandlet side. He's just PR after PR. We've been getting new features, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, thanks for all those contributions, Mark, and thanks to everybody on the call that's been making contributions into PowerShell. It's been a really, really awesome couple of months with the amount of stuff going in. We've been super, super excited. All right. Well, if nobody has any more questions, we're sitting at 10:22 here. I've got a couple to-dos in this, and then I'll try and get these published before Thanksgiving. I know that we're still got the pull request open for which ones were these? September and October. So my apologies there. But yeah, do we have anything else?
Do you think we'll still have a call in December?
Oh, yes. Let's talk about that real quickly. So I think we probably won't. And I know that that's kind of a bummer right before the GA coming out, but we generally just have so few people in town for like the third week of December is kind of a gnarly week. And actually,
before Christmas.
I think I'm flying that day.
Yeah, I'll be at Whistler that week.
Yeah. So let's just go ahead and say that the December community call is canceled. I don't know. Like, we've actually talked about doing this maybe on a different platform.
Oh yeah, we can maybe
There's
talk
been
briefly
some people
about that.
bouncing around some ideas on like Microsoft has this mixer thing. I know that some people do some of these on Twitch or Hangouts on Air. I'm actually not a huge fan of Hangouts, but if people are overwhelmingly in support there, like, we could potentially do that. Like, I've also been seeing like all this teletype stuff. Like, I think it'd be really awesome at some point to, like, I don't know. I'm just bouncing technologies around, but does anyone have any, like, is Skype working for everybody? Would people prefer? I guess it's working for everybody that's made it on the call so far, but maybe we should do like a Twitter poll or something.
Yeah, that might be more valuable.
But yeah, we consider December canceled. We are canceling December. We will tweet profusely. I may just cancel the series and publish like a very brief blog or something like that, just to make sure that everybody's aware. Because I know last time we canceled it, everybody still joined. So Skype, okay. Yeah, I figured everybody on this call is probably fine with Skype. It's the folks that said screw it and are chose not to join because they're having trouble there. So WebEx, is that what Hangouts on Air uses under the hood? Because I only have normal Skype at home and they have to stay at work. Got it. So I think you're able to join like from the web. Isn't there like a link web meeting thing? Yeah, Skype web app. For future conference calls, does Steve now own some of the other PS tooling? Can we add VS Code extension to the call? I mean, we talked about it today, but it would be great to have the devs here. I think that's totally fair. Yeah, it's really all part of the same ecosystem and platform, I think. So, are you opposed to that, Steve?
I think we should do it. So we'll just we'll start after the new year.
All right, yeah. So after the new year, I think we're going to keep going with Skype for Business. It was Christoph. Yeah, Christoph, if you don't, or you run into problems with the Skype web app or using that from home, definitely let me know so we can maybe revisit. But I think that should work from the web, and it shouldn't force you to log in or anything. So yeah, I think we're gonna go there and then just we'll make a blog post announcement, all that good stuff, and we'll see you guys in January.
Thanks for your work, guys.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good one, everyone. Go ahead, stop the recording here, and enjoy